I am so excited for our guest today. I am sitting with André Hueston Mack. André is an award-winning sommelier. He is also a creator, an innovator, and a storyteller. He redefines culture through wine, food, and community. He's also the founder of Maison Noir Wines and a host of ventures across Brooklyn, including And Sons Ham Bar, Vineyard Wine Shop, Chickadee Bread, and many others. André's work bridges tradition and innovation. He is also the host of Bon Appetit's World of Wine, where his humor and expertise makes wine fun and approachable. I want to tell you how I found André. So my team and I were doing some research on Black entrepreneurs, and we came across André's name. And then we came across the mention of Frasier. So this caught my attention because Frasier is one of my favorite TV shows to this day. And like André, Frasier has taught me so much. And so we took a deeper dive and we became hooked. We started watching all of André's past content, his interviews, his World of Wines, and consuming everything we could about André. This was a beautiful ritual for my husband and I. We would do this with a gin and soda infused with Spanish thyme from our garden or a Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I read 99 Bottles, A Black Sheep's Guide to Life-Changing Wines. And I felt like I knew André. I laughed, I cried, I learned so much from that book. The moment that he shared he was mistaken for a drug dealer named Pepper by Jennifer Aniston, I knew we were kindred spirits. André's humor, his vulnerability, his insights make him a cultural force. And today, we'll dive into his journey to discover the humanity, resilience, and love that drives everything that André does. André, thank you for saying yes. Welcome to the Soul Center podcast.
Well, thank you. Wow, what an introduction. I don't know. I can't follow that. Well, thank you so much. That was great. It's great to hear. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's all true. Thank you. And, that's just the tip of the iceberg. For those who may not know you, I've just shared some incredible accomplishments that you've had. But like I said, it's the tip of the iceberg. For context, who are you and who do you want people to know you as? Who is the man?
Yeah, that's a hard pressing question. I'm just a man. I'm just a man. I think, my grandmother always used to say, leave the world in a better place than in which you found it. And, for me, I don't know. I think I found the medium in wine and a place to talk. It was like, I knew I had a really great work ethic, right? I think for me, and it was like, I just didn't know where to apply it. I think earlier we were talking about you weren't walking in your purpose. And through my journey, I realized that sometimes you have to walk to get to your purpose. And a lot of times it doesn't feel like the right thing to do, but sometimes you have to do the things that you don't want to do to get to the places that you want to be. And it took a long time for me to figure a lot of things out. Right. And I'm still figuring those things out. It's no thing is an overnight success. It's 20, 30 years in the making. And I think for me, I could be passionate about a lot of things. It was just like me trying to find myself. And then, watching episodes of Frasier really just invited me to have wine in my life.
Yes.
Right. And so many things seemed to be going wrong at the time. Right. Where it's like, oh, you worked so hard, and you had all these jobs, and then you finally arrived at a career and something that you had been working at. And then you finally get there and you realize, wow, this sucks. And then part of it was like, am I being immature? Like, do I just really need to grow up? And this is what grow-ups do. And I just felt like I get to, I'm in finance and it just didn't feel right. And, you leave and I'm watching old episodes of Frasier and I feel like, wow, like they're having a really great time. And maybe, if I had wine in my life, it would be. And that show gave me the courage to walk into a store one time. Never did I think for one second that I would build a career out of it. But it was just something about a hobby, making a hobby into a career or into a lifestyle. And that was it. I started walked into the wine store, asking about wine, drinking about wine, caught the bug, had money ran out, had to go back to work in restaurants. And then I realized that there was really a path in that. And so I just kind of hopped on that path and, and really kind of devoted every waking moment. 18 months later, I'm the sommelier at the French Laundry, which is, I would have never believed it at all. Right. I think the year before I, had won a trip to Napa from like whoever sold the most wine over the summer or something at the restaurant I worked at. And I ended up going to Napa, and I just remember, my girlfriend at the time, she's like, hey, let's just walk down to the French Laundry. We couldn't get in. And I was like, who walks down? Why would we walk over there? Like, we don't have a reservation. That doesn't, I couldn't wrap my head around it. She's like, well, let's just go over there. I was like, that seems so dumb. And I complained the whole way. It wasn't, it was like a 10-minute walk from where we were. And lo and behold, there were 30 people out front, right? Taking photographs. And it was just interesting. And then I thought, I would have never thought a year later that I would be on the other side of that wall and I'd be working there. And so that was kind of it. And so I think for me, just like, I just want people to follow their passions. Like, you can really create the life that you really want.
Yeah.
Like, really. And it doesn't take, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of hard work.
Well, like I said, my husband and I, we've been binge watching all of your content. And one of your interviews that I saw, I believe it was the Forbes interview, where you talked about co-creation with the universe. And I was like, this guy really is my tribe. You get me, Andre. Yes. And everything you just said and your life is just a testament to co-creating with the universe and being purpose-driven. Can you talk a little bit more about co-creation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a kind of, my mom always, like, I think I told the story, where my mom was like, hey, you have to, you're not using your platform right, or something like that. She's like, listen, people invited you to be on their platform, their show or their interview or whatever, to talk about the things that you've done. But they're also there for you to talk about the things that you want to do. And so the idea of putting it out in the universe and letting people respond or react to it if they want to help, right, and want to be a part of it. And I never, I kind of got it in theory, but then when I had to put it into place, I wrote an email to everybody I had ever worked with. I'm on the last days of my tenure working for Thomas Keller, and I wrote an email to everybody I had worked with and over the past, years, and just basically said, hopefully one day our paths will cross. It's been really great to know you guys. I'm going off to Forge to do something new. I want to continue to learn about wine, but I feel like, one of the best ways to do that is to make my own. And I could scratch several of the itches I had. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have more creativity in my life. And, I hadn't written a business plan. I hadn't done anything, and I guess I did the creative part. That is the driving force. And I try to tell people, if you have an idea, okay, then work on that idea, look it up. The first step is buying the URL, creating the company, getting an LLC. Those are things that you could do with some spare cash to kind of get it going, to float it so it makes it feel real. I built out the whole website, right? I did all of those things before I even had a plan, but at least I could show people, where to go. And so it had always been that way with me. And, people started to write back. And that really kind of changed my life and put me in the right trajectory on wanting to build something. And then, and then my wife, she is very instrumental. Her and her good friend in college, they started this thing called the Pronoia Prize, and Pronoia is the opposite of paranoid, right? It's the whole idea that the universe is concerned with you to make shit happen. And they, it was a writing prize. They were both writers, and I took a lot of inspiration from that. That really echoed, a lot of the sentiments, that I was raised on. And so that was always it. It was like, if people wanted to help, I left room for them to be able to help, instead of thinking that the world is always against you. The other part of that is, it's positive thinking. It's like, no, they're all here. They just want to help, right? Or
you're attracting it to you.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely. Oh,
I love that.
And and that's, and that's it. And we live in an interesting time where everybody thinks there's a hack to everything. And there is no hack to the work. And that's what I try to keep telling you. And everybody, and I get it for young kids, where it's like, just because you had to walk 2 miles in the snow doesn't mean that I have to. There's a better way of doing things. And there definitely is, but there's no way to negate / hack the actual physical work or time that it takes. So even if it's not like knocking on doors, it was the hours that I spent on my sofa, interjecting myself into Twitter conversations to talk to people, to meet people. Right. You know what I mean? So it's okay. There was a better way. The better way using technology is that, maybe I didn't have to go knock door to door or get on the plane and travel, but there were hours and hours of, giving myself to the internet and answering questions and talking to people, introducing myself to people, all of those things, and that's what I try to say, at least to my kids too, where it's like, I would die if I had the tools that you had as a child. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would have moved out at 15, right? You know what I mean? Like, I would have had multiple businesses, but I get it. And, and you don't understand what you have if you never lived without it. And, I keep telling them, like my teacher used to say, what are you going to do? Walk around with a calculator in your pocket. And, and I just laugh and I was like, not only do I have a calculator, I have a television, right? You know what I mean? I have a film crew, all of those things are in my pocket on a phone. And that's it, and I think we live in a world where everybody thinks that there's a hack to it. There is some of it, but it still requires elbow grease, and it still requires, you to be insanely obsessed.
Insanely obsessed. That's the truth. Well, I want to shift a little bit. You have said that wine is culture. That deeply resonates with me. What does it mean to you? What does that specifically mean to you? And how does it reflect in the way you see and engage with the world?
Well, wine is culture. The reason why I got into wine, because it was just, it was multifaceted. It just wasn't a tasty beverage to get you effed up. Like, it could be if you wanted it to be. But the idea is that, wine was just more than alcohol to me. It told, it was biology, it was chemistry, it was history. It was all those things, it was politics, right? All of those things are wrapped in that. And just when you travel to other countries and you saw how wine was a really big part of their culture, like it just wasn't a meal if wine wasn't on the table. And I think here in the Western world, at least in the United States, wine was like a part of the table, but was like on a centerpiece, right? It was something that was to be worshipped. And in Europe, the wine is on the table next to the salt and pepper shaker, right? It's a condiment to not only to food, but to life. And so we grew up, at least I grew up with not having wine a part of my culture of like what we did, outside of the occasional holiday cheer, my parents really didn't drink. And then I grew up in the 80s, right? So where, drinking is a part of American culture for sure, right? Especially in the movies and pop culture. Me growing up, it's, the frat house, college, like college was meant to party, right? That's what you went for, right? And then in the end, if you showed up, you got a piece of paper and had to get to walk across the stage. And so so understanding what it meant to other cultures, I wanted to be able to make it mean something in my own life, in my own culture, in the culture that I create with my family, but also in the people that I surround myself with. And so that really, and how it all fit in is because now I just got on the road. Like, so I think a lot of people don't understand. It's like I traveled 280 something days a year. And so, and that's how I built this multi-million-dollar company, right? Like I didn't write a business plan. I didn't know how to grow a business or anything like that. I was a waiter. What I did was I walked up to a table of complete strangers and got to know them over 60 minutes. Right. And so the idea that I wasn't afraid to go talk to anybody. And what I understood is that, I lived in New York, and, in New York, everybody's someone special, right? That's how it is. Everybody is somebody. But when you left New York, your story resonated, 1,000 times. And so I just treated the whole world like a restaurant dining room floor. And I just went to every single place that would hear my story and listen to what I had to say and taste my wines. And I did that. Almost every single week I went to the airport. And
wow.
That's what I talk about when I talk about the work. And a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, you'll show up and you start to talk to them," but already they're defensive because their thing is like, I tell that story and then they say, "Well, I just couldn't be on the plane that much." Also, to somewhat say that you could do what I do, right? You know what I mean? Like, you could do what I do. Like, all of a sudden you're defensive to say that you could have what I have but you just didn't want to get on the plane. And for me, I realized that, like, sometimes your success, holds a mirror up to other people, and sometimes it makes things weird. And it's like, well, no, I don't think that I could get on a plane if I worked for Kraft cheese that much, right? You know what I mean? Like, but when it's my company, it's my legacy, it's the reason why I left my family. Yeah, I think I could. I think we could at least try to say, oh, if you could get on the road and do this, that you could change your life, and that you could achieve financial freedom, and everything that you ever dreamed of was on, like, to get on the plane. Like, and so it's just an interesting thing. And so for me, I was also traveling the country, traveling the world, and understanding how wine fit in everybody else's culture. But also, what I didn't realize was that by documenting on social, I was creating my own culture of what wine meant to me. And that's what was fun for me. I try to, like, give really good analogies to people. And so it was like, hey, how I thought about it was like, yeah, it's lonely and it felt weird, but, like, hey, this is kind of what it would feel like if I was, like, traveling with my favorite band, if I was part of my favorite band. They go on tour, they go on the road, and, it is lonely, but you're doing this thing. And that's what felt great to me. And part of what wanted to integrate and talk about culture, every place I went where I did dinners, we created gig posters, which are posters, that they used to do for musical events, right? So, like, your favorite band is showing up to Radio City Music Hall, they would create a poster for that event. And so we created all these posters for all these dinners that we went to. And so I was kind of building and mashing together this my own culture of wine and what it meant to me. And I think, lo and behold, after a few years looking up, that became a thing. It was everything. How I saw wine was just, I was just immersed in it, like a Burger King commercial would come on the television. And I'm so wrapped up in the world of wine that I'm looking at the commercial cockheaded and, cockeyed, like, hey, Burger King, Barolo is considered the king of Italian wines. But, like, literally, that's how I ran it.
You were in it.
And I'm like, oh yeah, Barolo King, right? Yeah, like, and then I started counting out the words: burger, 5 words, Barolo. And then I basically hijacked the Burger King logo, put Barolo on it, and it said Barolo King. And then we started to sell T-shirts, right? And so I had a T-shirt company that was, geared toward wine. It was kind of like a streetwear, skateboard, punk rock, and we sold T-shirts about wine, and it had our logo on the back. And we, on our website, for 2 years we sold T-shirts because we didn't have the right compliance to sell wine. And so, so it was just always just like a fun thing, right? It's like, and I'm showing up and I get it. Like, people are like, oh, we've never seen a winemaker like you show up. And it's funny because you would think that, like, I give people the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, they really weren't used to seeing someone like me, but all of me, right? Like, it's like, oh, like, the woman's like, well, yeah, you got 2 earrings on and, like, you're wearing tennis shoes and you have jeans on. And, like, for me, I was changing the culture to saying that, like wine didn't have to be so formal. Like, it could all be a part of our lives if, and it just takes you getting used to seeing someone like me do it. And I get the other part, the overarching part. There's not a lot of people that look like me that do what I do, which somehow, for me, I felt that made me feel empowered, right? There was like you can't forget me, right? That's what I mean? Like, the other side of it, yeah, okay, yeah, it felt uncomfortable, the owner of a store follow me around. I didn't believe who I said I was, but like, but I got it. Like, I could be pissed to be mad, or I could have screamed and say, you know what, I could write you a check for this whole store, right? Just relax, right? But I got it. And like, I think, for me, I led by just showing up. I challenged the status quo every single time I walked into a wine store. And, and this is before, me hosting any TV or any, shows. This is just me, André Mack, the winemaker, showing up to do a dinner, or showing up to your town. And
showing up traveling consistently.
Correct. Well, that's it. And that's what I tell everybody. Like, to do it 3 or 4 times is nothing. It's like to show up every single day. No matter, if people didn't buy, I still showed up. My good friend Gary V, I remember the day that he sent somebody to the store to go get the camcorder, right? He's telling me the whole story, and like, he didn't care. Like, I don't think that he got 100 likes to show 40 or something like, something like that. Right. And the thing is like, you're just like, what do they say? 80% of, 80% of, what do you say? Winning is like 80% is just showing up. You just have to show up. And there were days that like, oh my God, like, I don't feel like it. Right. I don't want to, and part of my career, it was just by being prepared and asking for opportunities. Like, I've read a magazine when I was in San Antonio, Texas. It talked about, it was called Wine List Confidential, and they interviewed these 3 sommeliers. And I picked up that phone and I called every single one of them and said, hey, you know what? I'd love to come, free, spend a week with you on the floor. And it's called staging. And, and just so, because I was running one of my first wine programs, and I didn't know if I was doing it right. And so, and it was through those connections that opened up other doors for me. I remember, there's one master sommelier, one sommelier in the whole state of Texas, and I showed up at his back door. And when I got there, I didn't want to go in. I was like, this is so dumb. And I wanted to revert to what I always do when I go to Houston. It was like, I'm going to go to the gallery and shop. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, she's like, you're already here, you got to go in. And it was so crazy. And, I kind of like mosey up to the door, went in, and it changed my life. That one afternoon, in less than 6 hours, it changed my life. And what I tell people is like, no, you have to prepare. I've always felt like I was preparing for something, but I didn't know what it was. But like, they say, like, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And it's okay to understand that you don't know what you're ready for, but you're just ready for it. And, I think the potential for greatness lies amongst all of us. It's in every single person. It's whether it's what you do when the opportunity presents itself. Do you rise to the occasion? Some people never rise to the occasion. Some people shy away, they walk away. Rising to the occasion, either you make it or you don't, but opportunities presented themselves and I rose to the occasion. And that's what I tell everybody. It's like, you have to be ready. I was studying, I felt great, and I don't know how to explain it, and I don't do a lot of reflecting. Right, because I would end up on the floor in the fetal position, right? Because you can tell where it all would have went wrong. Yeah. Right. In your mind that, I didn't want to do that, and I didn't really want to go in there. And if I would have listened to myself, I wouldn't have went in there. I don't know what my life would have looked like. But I can't waste time. Waste time on that.
You can't. And this podcast is a space for practical wisdom, of which you've already given so much. And I believe in, manifestation and mindset. And my husband is constantly making fun of me. He's like, what are you into all this woo woo, He's spiritually connected. But I'm always listening and watching these things. And it's talking about, from rags to riches, manifestation and all of this. And he is like, well, what did they do? What are the steps? Yes. Did you just believe in yourself? Great. Done. Check. Right. What's next? What do you do?
You got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Like, what did someone say? It's like nothing happens if you stay home. Right? Like, now we have the internet and you can make connections, but I think for a lot of the stuff for me, you have to go out in the real world. And I have to say, every time that I bitch and moan, where it's like I made, and I know how I am. So I'll tell my assistant, I was like, yeah, go ahead and RSVP me for it. In my mind, I want to go. And then the day happens and hours before it, I'm like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, I'm in another mood or something like that. I don't want to put down what I'm doing to go. And then I make myself go. And it's those times I make myself go. And then I meet somebody, an extraordinary connection, or I'm inspired by something that leads to something else. Like, where it's like, I leave that place and I'm in the car and I'm working on this thing. Like, and so I just tell people, like, you have to get out in the world and interact. Like, you can network via the internet and social, and that's helped. Right. But like, there's nothing like it. And especially, like, I think for me, it's like, I live in New York City. Like, I should leave New York City if I stop take advantage of what the city has to offer. Right. And so going out, like, there's always crossing paths of different people and different things. And so it's just been fun. But like, I just tell people, like, you got to get out of your comfort zone and you have to get out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, and you never know by, like, going to a cocktail party or an event, like, who you might meet or who they might introduce you to. I just rolled up to a bar in Santa Barbara. Like, I wanted to go have dinner, a quick dinner. I go to the bar, and, at the bar, I meet some fellow New Yorkers and, just some incredible people that introduce you to other stuff. And, and whether it's work related or not, I think it just makes your life better.
You show up and you're bold. And a part of that is attributed to you being a child of military parents and traveling around the world before settling in Texas. Yep. In your teenage years. So I'm wondering, you've spoken to it a bit. How has that shaped your identity? And specifically, do you recall those years of living in different countries?
Yeah, I think it shaped my life immensely. It showed me that the world was just a lot bigger place than my neighborhood. Right? I think for a lot of people, a lot of the problems that they have are the things they feel like they're stuck, and you're really talking about a 5-mile radius. You know what I mean? Like I say, if you want to change your life, the easiest thing to do is to move somewhere else. And that would change your life. That would change your perspective. And I think for me, we didn't grow up with a lot of money. My mother had me when she was 16, and so from where we were, like, the idea of being able to travel, you saw the world was just a lot bigger place and had a lot more to offer than just what you saw in your neighborhood every single day. I'm still amazed. I've lived here in New York City for 20 years, and I'm still amazed that there's been some people who've never been to Brooklyn, who've lived here their whole life. Right. And so that's what I mean. I think, like, being able to leave and understand that the world is just a bigger place and has a lot more to offer. And you're just not, chained to, the area that you were born in. And so, we lived quite a few places in the United States, and then moving to Germany was a big deal. And I think, we moved every 2 years. And I think a lot of people would look at that and say, that's not fair, that's unsettling, or whatever people might say nowadays. I feel like everybody is offended by everything and traumatized by everything. I just looked at it and said, oh, okay, this is great. And, my mom knew, like, I would come home from school one day and be like, so when do we leave? It was like, when do we leave? I'm ready to leave. When do we move? And she's like, in 18 months, right? You know what I mean? She goes, what happened at school? And, it was hard fitting in, but also that made me who I am, right? Like, every 2 months I was a new kid. So you were used to some of the attention, right? Because you were the newest face that came along. But then also you had to fit in. You couldn't rock the boat, right? You didn't have your crew. You were open to a lot of things. And, I just listen, it was like, I listen, I assimilate, but like, also, like, understanding who I am, like, being able to listen. And, and generally, I was the only person that looked like me in the room, and that's always been interesting to me because, you interact with all these other people, and I just say to them, I said, well, when was the last time that you were in a room where everybody looked different than you? And for a lot of the Caucasian friends, they they couldn't name a time.
Wow.
And I said, well, until that's happened to you, then like, you know what I mean? Like, what can you say to me? And so, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And so I think like being exposed to lots of different cultures and the way people lived, seeing a lot of the world made me understand that the world was a very big place. And I enjoyed that. And I think that really kind of helped my personality. Like, I don't have an accent. Like, everybody's like, well, you don't have an accent. And it's like, well, I mean, I kind of grew up everywhere, you know. You know, I mean, I've lived in New York the longest, I think, 20 years, but it just showed me that there were a lot of different ways to live, and there were a lot of different cultures and a lot of different, way that people interacted and lived. And I got to be a part of that in some way, and got to look at a lot of that and be a part of it. And so it was easy. And, and it made it, when you think about the transition, what I said about being a waiter, like, you just walked up to a table of strangers, you never met these people before. Right. And I think being a military kid and moving every 18 months, every 2 years, it changed something, it built something into my personality that, I'm okay with it. But then also I'm the weird dude where I'm on the plane and I don't say anything to the person sitting next to me. And it's only out of fear because
Really?
I don't want to say something and then they talk to me the whole way. And now that I think about it, it's maybe my own fear is that I don't want to say something to them and then I talk their ear off the whole plane ride. Right. So
really?
Yeah. But then, and then I had to grow up, right? And at some point you're like, hey, you know what? We're going to be sitting next to each other for the next 5 hours. I at least owe you a hello. How are you? You know what I mean? And that's it. But, but like being able to talk to a group of strangers or getting up in front of a lot of people, having, some people don't even like to have, attention. People don't even like for people to look at them.
Right? Some people are
into
terrified of that.
Yeah.
Terrified.
Yeah. And I guess I know a few people like that, but what was interesting to me and where I really noticed it is with my children. Like, so having children where it was just like, or one of my kids when he was 8, like he just didn't want to wear a new pair of shoes because they were just too new. And he just felt like that would draw attention, that people would ask him, oh, hey, like your new shoes, or you just got new shoes or something like that. And he was just weird. So one day he's outside rubbing dirt on them. And I just thought that was interesting. And, and everybody tells you, like, right? Like, they're all different. They're human beings, they're their own individuals. But, being a parent of four children, it's really interesting to me because they all have their own take. And what I realize is that birth order matters, right? And like how tall they are is how they perceive the world. So my youngest, who's 6, when you're looking at the world like this, perspective, it's changed your perspective on things. And it's really interesting. And like, and they, the 2 and 3, they give credence to number 1, right? Because he's the oldest, so it was just interesting. I think a lot of, I've worked on myself a lot by being a parent. Like, it's kind of really helped me, like, just kind of look through things and not to be an asshole about it. And then you have employees, right, which are just kind of like children too, right? So that being a parent, I think, has really helped me maybe be a better boss. I don't even like to use that word, but yeah.
Well, a better person, a more well-rounded person. It causes you to see yourself because you see that in your children. So you have 4 boys, correct?
Yeah, I have 4 boys.
And how old is the oldest?
He's 16. So 16, 14, 8, and 6. He just turned 6 earlier this week. Yeah.
Oh, mine are 8 and 15. So my girl is 15.
Okay. So you have a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
Got it. That's great.
Well, my boy is 7, about to be 8. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I actually wanted to talk more about your mom because you just said, and you have it in the book as well. Your mom had you at 16.
Yeah,
so she had you at 16. Your stepdad was an integral part of your life, and you called him your pops. Yep. And then there's the relationship with your biological dad. So I'm just wondering what impact that had on you as a person, but also as a parent, and how that's showing up in your parent life.
Yeah, my mom had me when she was 16. She was still in high school. And, I don't, as a parent, it's interesting about information. I learned something, recently, not recently, well, fairly recently, that I didn't understand that my mom left the house. So she's 16, she's one of 8, and she had me, and she left the house, and we went into foster care. I never knew that story.
Wow.
And there's pieces of it where you're like, oh, wow, like, okay, yeah, I remember Bernice, but I thought she was like Wawa's cousin. They're like, no, Bernice was a social worker that used to take care of you. Like, and so when my mom went into basic training, so we were both in the foster care. Then she graduated high school. She turned down a full ride to Purdue, and then she went into the military. And while she was in the military, I stayed with this family. I didn't know that. And so it kind of, I think a lot of that thing, like the internal thing in me was like, I just knew I could control what I could control. And that was how I looked at the world and how I worked in the world. And so having like this crazy, insane work ethic was kind of how I try to channel my energy. And then, I have to say, like, this person, my stepfather, just, when my mom came back from basic training, like this person was with her. So I've known him ever since I was little. And so, and he, and Willie was great. Like I said, like, and then meeting my biological father, it was a hard thing. This is a person that's kind of asking for my forgiveness, but I never blamed him for anything. Right. And so I had a father figure in my life. Like I didn't miss this person, nor did I really yearn to know this person. And, and trying to convey that without, like, I'm not being mean. It's just how I am. Like, I just feel like I was just practical about it. Right. Like this is what it is, and also in the era, like in the era of like where I felt safe, I was protected. Like nothing happened to me. My mom didn't sell me. You know what I mean? Like all the bad things never happened to me. So like, what do I really have to complain about? Right. It's kind of how I look at it. And maybe a lot of people in my generation do. I'm sure there's some people in there like, damn, these boomers. I'm not even a boomer, but they're like, these boomers, he's clearly got trauma pent up. But for, so it never really mattered. Like to me, it's like there was somebody there. And how does that show up? Like me being the father and a parent, a lot of times somewhat conflicted. I'm there and I think I get to spend more time with my kids than most. And I only say that because I travel a lot. I could be, let's say, in Nebraska, and in the back of the salesperson's car, FaceTiming my kid, reading them a book while they're in the bed before I have to before they go to sleep here in New York, and before I go in to go do this dinner. Yeah. Right. So it was a lot of kind of that back and forth. But I had always, I grew up, like I said, I was most of the time one black person there, right? One face of color. And all my friends, all these white kids always, they fought over me. They're like, no, he's going to stay tonight at my house. Can he come stay tonight at my house? Like, that kind of thing. Right. And so, and what I realized is that, when I went to their house, they always had more than me. They always had more than my family, palatial, like all those things. Okay. And I just remember I would be like, so where's your dad at? And he's like, oh, he's off on business. And I just felt that like, oh, because my dad and my parents aren't away on business, that maybe they're not trying hard enough. You know what I mean? And I feel like in my life, that was it. I'm away a lot, and I might have missed a birthday party or two, but I'd feel like I struggle with that a little bit because I wanted to be there for everything, but I realized that like sometimes I can't be there for everything. Because I travel a lot. And I get that. Yeah. And the travel part was like, at least I'm building something, right? Like it wasn't like, it's like, you try to give your children a childhood that you would want to have yourself, but then I realized that's not what they want because their situation is different. For me, I was like, well, shit, if my dad wasn't home and we had all this stuff, that would be great. You know what I mean? That's how I looked at it, right? Go on then. You know what I mean? Yes. Go on, take your behind out there. Like, cool.
And now we take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Today's sponsor of this episode is rowenasutherland.com. This is a community that I am very proud of. It is a space where you can receive practical guidance and wisdom. You will get insights into various meditations and exercise practices, and of course, my favorite, recipes for teas. Herbal teas is something that is very central to my life. I recently became an herbalist, and I've discovered the connections to plants to be life-changing. I think that nature has so much wisdom that we can pull from and can change the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we operate in our everyday lives. It has transformed me, and I hope it would have an impact in your life. So if these are things that align with you and your interests, then hop on over to rowenasutherland.com and join the community.
I'm loving the momentum. We're talking about traveling and being a parent and how all of that works. And I was wondering, I saw one of the videos with you and your family going away, and it rained. You were in France the whole time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was wondering if you take them, your wife and the boys, with you when you have to work so much. Do you take them?
Yeah, absolutely. So all my kids are homeschooled. And it's funny because when you say that nowadays, it's like, everybody, they picture like, them around the dining room table and my wife administering the curriculum. It doesn't modern day in New York City doesn't work that way. New York City is their campus. And so they take classes all throughout New York City. With other homeschoolers. So there's, maybe like 10 to 15 people. He has a book club. I think it's in somebody's living room and it's like 6 kids. So they are all throughout New York City. And so it used to be when I first started, when we just, when we had I call them the varsity. So when we had our 2 older children, they would come with me 1 week a month. So we would all meet up somewhere 1 week a month, and I would be in New Orleans, and doing my thing, and then they would be out during the day doing something. They would visit a plantation or something like that, something educational, something like that. And so and they do. And so when we decided to have number 3, my wife doesn't believe in odd numbers, right? So so in order to have 3, you had to commit to 4, right?
Yeah.
And so we decided, like after number 3, that we would go to Europe. And my wife had been entertaining. They were thinking that they wanted to, live in Europe for 6 months out of the year. And for me, I was like, well, shit, I'm just going to continue to do what I do, work. So cool. In New York, 6 hours, east, I can go visit my family in Europe. 6 hours, west, I can be at the winery in Oregon or anywhere in between. And so we decided to, so we moved to Europe we moved to Lyon for 4 months. And just to kind of try it out. Our 2 older kids had been taking French for about 2 years. And so they went into immersion school, and so they were there, and it was cool. We had a really fun time. The French we moved to Lyon because we realized in Paris, if you had bad French, they would just speak to you in English, right? So but in Lyon, they didn't even speak English, so you just kind of had to make it work. But I guess what I kind of realized that thinking of different cultures, they're not really kid-friendly people. And so that kind of made it kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't know. And so we decided, so we moved back. And so it was just like a trial thing. And, I think this was number 3 was probably about 6 months. And they had a really great time. It was a fun time. And that, and that was the video you saw. I was, I think I filmed maybe, 3 or 4 years of my life. And I was doing the editing and got busy. So I got tons of footage. But I've only kind of produced a few on YouTube. But it was a really fun time, to be able to travel and how to spend the summers. And normally I take the summers off somewhat, right? But now we bought a place in Vermont, and so that's kind of the summer hub. And and the kids are different. It's so funny because like I realized they're like, oh, they don't want to hang out with their family, like they want to be with their friends. Right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, you don't want to go to Europe? They're like, no, like, it's like, really, you just want to hang out here with your friends. So, and then they're really into camp, which changed a lot of things. Right. So normally we would spend the summers in Oregon, but because of camp, but yeah, we traveled quite a bit. And like, that was a really fun thing for all of us. Like that, I think that was a big thing for me. Like when I think about how I was raised, like traveling was a big part of our lives, seeing the world, and and how that manifests or translate into me being a parent now is really like, I feel like the greatest gifts that you can give your child is the gift of language and the gift of travel. So they can communicate, but then also, and what you realize is like, the more you travel, the smaller the world becomes, right? It is a big world, but the connections, your connection to the people in the land becomes smaller. And so I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. We homeschool as well. And we're, for the nature of our work in culture, we travel all over. So our 7-year-olds, like when it's cold, he was like, I want to go to the mountains now. And people are like, what? You're in the Bahamas. What is this kid talking about?
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love it. I think it's a gift too.
Yeah, it totally is.
You have built 7 businesses. Are there more than 7?
There's a whole bunch of them, depending on what we're talking about.
You have apps as well. You're
and those
tech
are just,
as well.
the apps were just fun, right? It was like, I don't make any money from that. Like, and this is what I talk about when I talk about culture, right? I just wanted to do things like, I have like an app that's a video game, which is like, in the,
I love that.
For lack of a better term, it's a stupid game, right? It's a waste of time. Like, I wouldn't spend my time on that game because I would be doing something else, right? Like, I stopped playing video games because of that. But it's like a bottle flip challenge, when kids were throwing water bottles, and I just replaced them with wine. But like, for me, I say I do it for the culture because I want people to understand that that you can put more things out there. It's like, oh, I didn't make the best video game, but maybe that allowed someone who has the skills to do that, to do a wine themed video game or whatever it is. Right. And so that was always for me, like the idea of putting it out there and doing it so people know that you can do it. I used to wash dishes at a restaurant. Right. And then learned about wine, and wine took me all over the world and then changed my life. And for me, I'm constantly, holding up a mirror back to the industry to say that, hey, like, it's not a dead end job. Like, I just remember when people are like, oh, you work at a restaurant. It's like, like, when are you going to get a career? Right. And like that kind of thing. And my thing is like, there's life after the floor, like, there's life after the floor. Like, we worked on the restaurant floor. There's other things that you can do, and creating lanes and showing people that it can happen. Like, I just like, I have a beanie, like, what I mean? Like, I'm selling a beanie, or I designed a wine key, or, you're creating a creative on a show that's bringing wine to light and truly showing that, like, what wine is. Wine is a conduit. It's bringing people together, right? It's the whole idea of that. I had an interview show called Through the Grapevine where I interviewed celebrities, and we kind of talked about, we taste through 5 wines. I interviewed them, asked them questions, but at the end of each round, I asked them what they would pay for this wine, or what they think how much it would cost, kind of thing. And so it was entertaining. It was fun, but like, that's what wine is there. Wine is to bring people together, and like, really showing people that's what it is. Wine doesn't have to be 100% of the conversation, because sometimes that's boring. Wine could be 20%. It's playing in the background. It sets the mood. And then what we're doing in real life when we're enjoying a glass of wine. So that's kind of my purpose and how I led. I don't have the biggest businesses in the sense of like, I employ hundreds or thousands of people. I don't think that's for me how that would work. How it works for me is being visible and being in places and being a beacon of light, not only for the people who look like me, but anybody who is inspired by my story to say that, you can do it too, that you have a place in this world and you can leave a mark on it or thrive in it in a way that maybe you didn't think that you could.
Mm-hmm. And restaurants has been such a cornerstone of your life, professionally and personally. You met your wife at a restaurant. Could you tell us the story of how you met? Oh,
geez. Yeah. It's so this is really funny. I was recently on a podcast, and it came out 2 days ago. And and what was so funny was my wife was on that podcast 20 years ago.
Wow.
And so they released my podcast 2 days ago, and then the next day they released hers. They redid her, like, she didn't come back on, but they aired it again.
Yeah.
And that's really funny because, I came to New York and, it's interesting. Most restaurants have a no fraternization policy, but you're like, well, shit, I'm at the some bitch, I'm at this SOB 80 hours a week. Like it's got to be my dating pool because I don't have no time. I don't know anybody else. But I met my wife at work and, we had a secret romance because there was a no fraternization policy. And, she was pretty impressive. She went to Columbia and then she was still, a lot of people at a restaurant of this caliber, this is all you did. You weren't like, there were no college students there, right? You know what I mean? This was hardcore, yeah. And, but she was getting her MFA and I think, it was just requiring she could do that on one day with her classes. And, and so we were dating. And then I just remember, she was writing these essays, that she had to turn in for assignment for MFA. And a lot of it was just about what was happening in her life. And so working at this prestigious restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm in one of the essays, blah, blah, blah. And, I had never heard of this whole thing. She's like, it's like big Sex in the City, kind of vibe, right? Where everybody's like, she's like, oh, I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, oh, like Carrie, like, she writes a column. Because I remember that part. I did watch some of it. She writes a column, and then my wife was saying, "Yeah, but what was interesting is like you could take all of the column pieces and put them into a book, write it forward, and package it. How you have a book, that kind of thing." And I just remember one night she was talking about these essays she was writing. And I said, "Well, that sounds like that's your column, right there, right?" And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're already writing a column. It's just not published. You're not known for it. But like these assignments that you have to have each week, you have to turn in an essay. That's a column. And you're really writing about stuff that's happening in real time in your life. Right. So you can't publish it as a column because nobody gave you a column, but can't you, your end goal was to put all of those columns together and make them into a book. Right. So you already got the columns for your book. Right. And that's how it started. So she ended up writing a book. And then, so she left the restaurant. She sold the deal, left the restaurant, and then it kind of leaked out, and then it was, she was, considered enemy of the state, right? Because nobody signed an NDA, right? You have the right to tell your own story, but I get it. If I heard of a past employee was writing a book about working for me, like I'd be a little shook, right? I'd be like, okay. But then also you have to understand the marketing, right? Like, so the marketing team for HarperCollins is like, this book is like Sex in the City meets Kitchen Confidential. And you're like, and I'm sure the chef was like, what? And so it was touted as this tell all, and really it was a tell some, and it was a love letter, not only to the restaurant, but to me. And what I really dug about my wife was, my wife's like, listen, like, I'm not here to shit on the place that I worked at. Like, that's not it. Like, one day my kid's going to read this book. And I did, my wife was a real writer. And this is during the time when they were giving out book deals to bloggers. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and she's like, and like Waiter Rant and all those kind of style magazines, everybody's bloodthirsty. Right. And that's not it. And that's not the book she wrote. And I believe that it aged impeccably well. And it's pretty amazing that my two older kids have sat down and read the story about how their parents met.
Wow. I haven't read that as yet, but I look forward to reading it. Is she still writing?
Yeah, and this is the interesting part, where this is someone who had a career, that all of that was going on, all this hype. And she came home early on the book tour because she wanted to be a mother. And she wanted to have a family. And then she's like, I want to be the architect of our children's education. And so, and now she's writing, and I think, my wife is, she's going to write about what's happening in her life. Right. So I think for her, there's more material, there's more things people want to know what happened. So she's written a few other things, nothing that's been published yet, but like, I generally, it feels like right around when they're 5 or 6 that, there's a little bit of break and there's more freedom and stuff for her. And since we're done having children, that she's in a good place. Oh yeah, we're positively sure. I'm good. Like, what I mean? She's like, ever since I was a little girl, I imagined myself with 4 kids. And I was like, okay, I didn't imagine myself with 4 kids, but cool. But I can hook you up. And we'll have 4 kids. And so that's been the thing. But yeah, we met in the restaurant, and restaurants were dear. Like, the New York restaurant scape is legendary. And like, for me,
Yeah.
all I ever wanted was could I have a part of that? Could I have a slice of that? And traveling all across the world, hosting events in other people's, hospitality venues, their restaurants, their bars, or whatever. I just wanted to have one small little place in my neighborhood if you were looking for me when I'm not on the road. And this is where I would be. And that was the Ham Bar. And then COVID happened, and then we opened up all these other places. And so, restaurant business is a hard one, and definitely he got hit really hard by COVID. But my heart lies in it, and I still love it. But my main business is wine, right? Making wine, and we're selling it all over the world is what we do. And then in my spare time, I picked up, being a host of, TV and media has become a larger part of what I do now.
You're so good at it. I mean, I told you this. I think you're hilarious. So you're just highly entertaining. I will watch anything you're in.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really interesting. Yesterday was a long day. Yesterday, I filmed 3 episodes. I was like, oh my God. But I was like, let's just push it. And yeah, we ended up shooting 3 yesterday, which is, it's fun. Try to bank them. My time is limited, but, I have a good time filming them. And, I think at the beginning, I didn't care. Like at the beginning, it was this kind of dumb. Like I just, when I say dumb, I was just like, why am I doing this? Like I'm reviewing $15 wine. And then somebody asked me, like, do you even drink $15 wines? And I was like, shit, some days, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, that I do. Like, yeah, so I do. And I pride myself in trying to know what's out there, in the sense of if you're buying for a restaurant, what new wines are out there, what new projects people have. So I do. And the idea of being on TV and doing it just kind of was or whatever. Exactly. It was one of those moments. You ready? When I was in the back of the restaurant and I didn't want to go in. Right. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to go in, and same thing where it's I don't really want to film these things. And I film they give me a 2 pilot deal. I filmed 2 of them, and I'm kind of okay, this is all right, whatever. Right. It's in a dark room. Right. There's 4 of the people on the other side of the camera. I don't know them. They don't laugh at my jokes. Right. You know what I mean? And then you're and then and I don't even look at them. My team looks at them to see if I black out and say something crazy. And then it comes out. And when it comes out, I don't watch them. And then one of my kids says, well, a couple of weeks later, she's like, this has a couple million views, right? And I'm like, who the hell is watching this? I just couldn't wrap my head around. It's I don't understand who's watching these things. And so much to the point where I think I was out with a group of friends at Blue Ribbon, so it's open late, I think. And we were there, I think it was maybe around 3:00, but they don't close till 4. And they were I was like, oh, you would love to enjoy another bottle. They're like, okay. And I go to the bathroom. When I come back, we switch waiters because somebody was going home. And I sat down, and the new waiter was like, oh my God, I'm one of your biggest fans. And for me, same thing. I'm kind of deflect the attention, right? Just because, all right, then you're teased by your friends. Oh, Hollywood, all of that. I just don't want to deal with that. So I was talking to these people, this guy, and I was like, yeah. And I was like, I don't even really like filming those shows. And I said that to him, and this person turned around and looked at me, and he says, well, you know what? You're kind of ruining it for me. And that changed everything. And I had to say to myself, I was like, Andre, well, this is what you said that you wanted. And if this is what you said you wanted, then you should probably be better at it. Right? I didn't know how to accept whatever that is. It's, little did I know that it would get way more uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to be, even though people, it's a novelty to it. It feels great. People recognize you on the street for your work, whatever. But in the crux of it, there was no small talk, and I felt like defecting, and that was it. And I realized it was okay, if this is what you want to do, then you should be better at it. And so, now I lean in, right? It's oh, now they want to talk, you lean in, blah, blah, blah. Which one is your favorite? I think you have to work at anything and everything, right? It's just not a natural reaction, now I'm in restaurants, and, people are sneaking, taking photos of me, you know what I mean? So I get it. I get part of it, and I understand it. I think I had to understand the role, because I hadn't come to terms that that people actually watch this thing. Yeah, there's numbers on the scoreboard, but I just didn't.
It didn't connect.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, it was just random. I was in a restaurant, and then months later, I'm walking across the street and somebody's holding up traffic and waving, saying, "Hey, blah blah blah, we love you, blah blah blah." So like, I think as that part started to grow, that part was, it would, I could understand the other part where it's like I had to talk to people, but it's been fun and it's been interesting. I'm here on your show. I mean, I know that's not the reason why, but
I love that. I'm excited about that. And so
it's great. It's good.
Our audience. So if wine is about contrast and stories, what is the most powerful story you've told through a bottle?
Most powerful story I've told through a bottle. Wow. I mean, that I've never been asked that question before. There are probably several. And it's funny because now I'm kind of like going through my book and I don't want to share any of those stories because they're already in the book, right? And you've already read them.
So everyone go get the book. We'll have the information in the description.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think the most powerful story is my story, right? I think, and that's, that can be told through some of the wines I make, but like overall, I think generally what happens is we go to these wine dinners, I'm hosting these wine dinners. That's, going across the country, selling my wares. And I think what people get caught up on is actually my physical story. Right. So like when I talk about what I do in the wines and go through the wines, I talk about how I got here. I talk about how I got here. Right. And I think for a lot of people, I think the reason why you asked me to be on the show wasn't because of the wines that I make. It was because of my story. Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of times, and, even at the beginning, people are like, "Oh my God, like, do you do public speaking? Because like, do you do motivational speaking?" I was like, no, I'm just telling you how I got here. And it's a story I know very well. So I can articulate it. Right. So it might roll off the tongue very great, but that, I think maybe that is the greatest story I've ever told. And maybe it's not through one bottle, but through many bottles. I just, I think a lot of people resonate with me because I feel like I could be their brother-in-law, right? Or, I'm like your brother's friend or, your cousin. And, so I can laugh. I'm relatable in that way. And I think a lot of people gravitate to me, and so they gravitate to the story, and I just feel like I'm, and I tout that. I'm just, I put my pants on like everybody else. But I think maybe the most powerful story is my own, and saying, this is not the wine world is a very competitive industry. And generally people start with very large fortunes. So the idea that I'm competing against people who started pharmaceutical companies, that started, telecom companies, right? And so it takes an outlay of capital to even play in this game. And the fact that like I could build it and do it based off story and interaction with people, and and the wines are genuine. I now find myself in a place of now, because more people know me in the world because of YouTube than they do know of wine, that like somehow, there's a Reddit thread where somebody's like, yeah, I think, his wines are just popular right now because he's on TV. And I'm like, no, I built a multi-million business before anybody ever saw me on YouTube. Right. But I have to realize, I don't accept it, but I realize that now that, I'm a public figure, that most people don't ever do their research, one, but like two, I'm going to be subject to those things that aren't true, are just assumptions. And I'm okay with that. But I think my story overall is probably, the greatest story. And, I would have to say the most powerful, because I feel people walk away understanding, without walking through my shoes, what it took for me to get there, but also leaving some room for them to believe in themselves.
And it takes a lot to get to that place where you can be okay, no matter if it's positive or it's negative, you can be grounded. So do you have any spiritual practices or rituals or daily practices that ground you as a person?
I don't. I mean, I think maybe my family, I think because I've done a lot. I think a lot of people, I'm 50 something years old. You know what I mean? Like I'm 52. And it feels like I've lived several different lives. And also it just feels like I've heard it all, right? Like in the sense of like, an employee says something, I'm like, bro, you got to come up with a better excuse than that. You know what I mean? I've heard that before. Like your intuition becomes a superpower at some point. I don't. I think, I'm at that place of, a fear of losing it all. You know what I mean? Makes you work harder. But I don't. I think, what I realize is that there's always a reason to stay when you're on the road. There's always a party. There's always like so-and-so's coming to town or this other part. But, and if I didn't have a family, maybe I wouldn't. And, to be honest with you, I don't think that I would have a family if I didn't have, the partner that I have, my wife, right? It takes, I think I'm a hard person to love, right? And then, and a person who allows me to be me, like, I can fully immerse myself in building a business, and I wouldn't have a family if it wasn't for someone who makes it all happen. And I think my grounding force is just having a family, having something to come home to, is a really grounding factor, in either way. Right. You know what I mean? Like whether, so the positives are the positive, the negatives are the negatives. Like not every, you're never as good as they say you are. And you're never as bad as they say you are. And so for me, if I'm living the life that I want or on the path to living that life, then that feels great to me. But, there are no really real rituals in the way of that. Like I sit down and practice. I think, just in theory, it's like I get up and move. You know what I mean? You get up and move and you talk, it's not begging. I think some people think that it's like, but closed mouths don't get fed. And also, what you realize is that in others' eyes, when you reach some plateau of success in other people's eyes, sometimes they don't think that you need help. They don't offer help.
Yes,
some people, yeah. And some people might even say, well, he doesn't need my help. He seems to be doing fine on its own. Right. And, I think, and all of this is, I think I've learned a lot about myself, but more importantly about other people's intentions around you. And, I can be at a party. I was at an event and I came home and my two older kids were up and I walked into their bedroom and I was like, hey guys, I was like, Pop needs a hug. I just need to feel what's real. Right. And that was great. And, and they were like, what's going on? And so, I sat down and said, hell, you're just at a place and people want stuff from you. You're not real sure. And it's kind of weird. And but I know that you guys love me for who I am. And I just needed a little hug. And so, and I think that's the grounding part of it. And that part makes me feel great. And that, that charges me up enough that, that I can go back out into the world, someday Superman, he needs, his cape needs dry cleaning, he's got to chill for a minute. Yeah. And I think my family really kind of helps me put that in perspective, even when I'm thinking too large. Right. And, and things get out of hand and you realize like, well, I say that I'm doing it for them. Am I really doing it for them?
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do for them, for what you do for the culture. You show up in this world so beautifully, and I just appreciate you as a person and what you do for our larger community, even throughout the diaspora. It's significant and necessary.
Thank you. No, thank you. I'm very proud. I'm very proud to represent the culture. Yeah, I am. You
should be. So as we get ready to close, I wanted to ask you, do you have a favorite Frasier episode?
I think
or a couple.
I think my favorite is always the Corkmaster one. That was the one where I realized that I wanted, and then they really realized that they, I think there was the local wine club and blah 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 blah, and somebody wanted to be the Corkmaster. The one Corkmaster was retiring, and then I think Frasier decided that he was going to run for it, and nobody else was going to run against him, so he needed the votes. And then Niles has a new girlfriend, and she's like, "Yo, no, you should actually run for it." And so I don't know. There were so many of them that were just funny off the rip. They were just like really funny, and because they were characters of themselves, they were just pompous a-holes that but you loved them because they made fun of who they were. And and then if you looked a little deeper, you're like, oh, he's a collector of African art. right? They were stylish. You had a, baby grand piano. They had B&O phones, like house, like, you know what I mean? They drink, don't, so it was a lot about that show that like caught me, but that was one of my favorite ones, just like pure joy and fun, and I think that was the episode that I first heard of the producer called Gaia. It's an Italian winemaker. They make Barolo and Barbaresco. And it was funny. I was telling that story of that episode 2 years ago at lunch with the daughter, who's now the winemaker and owner of the company, Gaia.
Wow.
And it was funny because, it took over the table conversation for like 10 minutes or so. And they were like, did you know that that they mentioned your dad's, your guys' winery on the show? And she's like, no, I didn't at all. It's like, oh yeah, that was the first time I ever heard of it.
Wow. Yeah, I love how pop culture connects us. And that's another thing that I enjoy what you do. You make everything so accessible, and you connect pop culture with wine and spirits, and it's great.
Well, that's the best part. I think that's what I know, right? Like that's, to me, is like that's the best part of it, where it's like, oh, hey, I remember this. This is, and when for me, it was a tool that I used for myself, where it was like, how do I remember vintages? Right. And so at one of our restaurants, we have a lot of older wine on it. And so it talks about what was popular in that year that wine was released. 1972, Grease was just released and was a box office hit. Hungry Hungry Hippos was invented. Right. You know what I mean? So it was all of these things that kind of happened that I think that wine is a nostalgia, right? And it should take you to a time and place. It's a bookmarker of time and place. And because it is vintage dated, we should pay attention to that date and to history. And so I think pop culture is always an easy way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I keep saying last question, but the last question, right, what are you drinking today? Are you drinking anything today?
Let's see. I got a little soup down here. I have been drinking my friend. This is called Estaca. And this is from Mexico. This is Bacanora. So Bacanora is like a cousin of tequila. And so when we think about tequila is the name of a place, right? It's from Jalisco, and they have tequila. Then you have other towns, they have mezcal, right? And this is Bacanora. Mm-hmm. So it is made from agave Weber, a descendant of that. But this is kind of a cross between mezcal and tequila. And this is what I've been drinking lately. Really fun. Yeah, I think I made her drink it all. Let's see. I didn't drink it all, but yeah, this is great stuff. Okay. Yeah, and you'll start to see this stuff like this kind of as Americans in the industry delves more into Mexico and tequila, like tequila's white hot right now, and then that kind of spilled over into mezcal, and then you're starting to see some of these other. This is from Sonora, and so like you in some other regions, you're starting to see the local spirit come to light and be celebrated here in America, and Bacanora is one of them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Today, I am going to be having a celebratory toast with my husband. We're going to be having Jamaican rum.
Oh my God, that looks so good.
Young's wine in the Bahamas.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is going to be a toast to you today.
Got it. So how are you going to enjoy that? Do you enjoy that straight up, or do you have it in? So how do you have that? You just sip it?
Well, I'm an herbalist, and so my husband and I will pick different leaves. So I like soursop, guava, dilly leaves, and we make a tea. So I like to put it with the tea.
Oh, so you put it with the tea, and then awesome. I'm gonna try that.
So like I'll steep the tea. It's so good. It's delicious. I love the flavors. So you boil the water, you let it steep for 10 minutes. You remove all the leaves, you just strain it, and then you have a nice tea, and then you can add your rum to it.
Oh, I love that. And is it warm or is it cool tea? Is it a warm drink? That's cool. Okay.
I let it cool down. Sometimes I like a hot drink, but
that sounds awesome. Like, I'm from Texas, so we, sun tea is a thing, sweetened tea is a thing, but the idea of tea and rum, it never really hit me that way, but like that sounds like maybe. Do we have any rum? We only have Haitian rum in that at this house. Sorry.
Oh, Haitian rum is so.
No, I know. My wife, she lived in Haiti for 2 years when she was like 12 with her parents, and we have a whole bunch of rum upstairs, but all the other stuff I moved to our other place. But anyways, I'm gonna try that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really good. And if you need any recipes for leaves, I got you.
All right, I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna hold you to that. That sounds like that could be fun. No, that could be fun.
So to all of our viewers and listeners, go out, get Andre's book, read it. It's hilarious and it's informative and it makes wine and spirits so accessible. You learn so much and it causes you to reflect on your own life and you realize how connected you are to wines and spirits throughout your life. Correct. Because so much came up for me.
That's awesome.
So it's 39 bottles, a Black Sheep's Guide to Life-Changing Wines. And you can find all of his details in the description. Andre, I don't know if you have any announcements about anything you're doing or where we can find you or follow you.
Yeah, just hit me on Instagram. I don't have business cards anymore, but Instagram is great. I'm André H. Mack, and I'm working on my new book called Thirst Trap, How to Love Wine Without Monogamy.
Nice.
Yes.
All right, we will be looking forward to that.
I just sold that, so it comes out in 2026.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing with the community, and hopefully you've been centered on the Soul Center podcast.